So I think we can start. Hello, everybody. I'm Lucas Perron. I'm the founder and director of the international research platform SIMM. Welcome to the 6th session of the symposium. So good to see that again, so many of you are out there online. Here in Brussels, it's now morning. I'm together with Raffaele Monnoyer and Amber de Munk, welcoming you at the Center for Fine Arts BOZAR. Thanks to them, to the BOZAR team, we can make this online symposium possible. Today's session is the second of 2 sessions during which we focus on research which tries to come to a better understanding of what motivates musicians to want to engage themselves in social music programs. It's following the session we had on the 12th of January, during which we heard Anne de Bisschop and Philippe Verneert and Kate Wareham and Jun Suzuki on this same topic. After the short presentations of the 4 research projects we selected for today, Graça Motta will first chair a panel discussion. The scholars in today's panel are from Italy, France, Germany, and Japan. Following the panel discussion, I will be able to propose some of your questions to them. And as you can read in the chat, your camera and audio have been muted and will continue to be muted throughout the session. If you have questions for the Q&A, which will follow the panel discussion, please use the Q&A button, which is down below your screen, not a chat button. Your questions will only be visible for the speakers and moderators, not for the other attendees. I will be back later on, but before giving her the floor, let me first introduce you shortly to Graça Motta. Besides being one of the co-founders of the research platform SIMM, Graça Motta is a pianist and educator of music teachers. She lives and works in Porto, Portugal. She also has a long career as a senior researcher of the CIPEM, the Research Center in Psychology of Music and Music Education of the Institute of Ethnomusicology at Porto Polytechnic. Graça, the floor is yours.
So good morning everyone, and good evening. And I'm very happy to be here, and I am really hoping for a very good and engaging discussion among all the nice projects that will be presented today here. And before we start our today's session, I want to dedicate a very special word to Lucas Perron, by thanking him to have organized and put all his effort, engagement, passion to make possible the 5th symposium in pandemic times. From the beginning, when it became clear that it was not possible to get participants to come to Brussels, Lucas worked in an alternative solution, and thanks to BOZAR, we are enjoying these up to now wonderful and thought-provoking sessions. So thank you so much, Lucas. Thank you so much, BOZAR. And welcome to the so broad audience that has also engaged to be with us today from so different time zones. Thank you very much to be with us. That enriches much this session. Today we have our second session on musicians in social music projects. This is indeed a most relevant topic, and also one where SIMM is right now, as you know, involved in systematic research through the project led by Jun Suzuki. Our today's presenters will give us a broad insight into what it means for musicians of various origins and professional engagements to become involved with social action through music. And by way of such an involvement, to better understand what it is at stake when we talk about promoting social inclusion and impact of music making with diverse populations and be able at the same time to systematically interrogate what are the benefits, if there are any benefits, of such interventions. I am particularly happy today to be sharing a session where we have a range of scenarios that, on the one side, discuss the role of music institutions and organizations promoting programs targeted at different populations or societal needs, and on the other, look at the individual engaged musicians that, by way of their performances, address a particularly critical aspect of our relatively recent common world history. I will briefly introduce each of the presenter before their presentation. And we will begin with the co-authored presentation. It will be presented by Titiana Rossi. She's professor of pedagogy of music at the Conservatory Arrigo Boito at Parma, where she has coordinated the first level Master in Musical Educational Activities. Her co-authors are Carlo Lopresti, is professor of music history at the same conservatory in Parma, where he is also coordinator for researches and publications. Lucia Brigenti is a musicologist, journalist, and music critic. She is the coordinator of the Boito Conservatory's press office. And finally, Gilda Ripamonti is professor of advanced criminal law and research fellow in criminal law at the Università degli Studi dell'Insubria in Varese, where she is also member of the scientific board of the Restorative Justice and Mediation Studies Center. Their presentation is entitled Artistic Citizenship and the Social Impact of Music, from Toscanini and Abbado to the COVID-19 pandemic at the Parma Conservatory of Music. Tiziana, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Is it okay? Thanks, Graca. Good morning to everyone. I'd like to present our work, Artistic Citizenship and the Social Impact of Music from Toscanini and Abbado to the COVID-19 pandemic at the Parma Conservatory of Music. Our study investigates how the Conservatory of Parma, an Italian higher music education institute, has acted to foster the social impact of music. The study investigates which areas of social impact have been involved by the past action of conservatories, reflected on the legislation regarding the needs for art and science to have a social impact in light of the consequences post-pandemic, retraces the conservatory mission to a historical identity. The conservatory institutional mission is training, specialization, research, production, and the third mission, promotion of the social impact of music, is part of the third mission in public engagement. That set of institutionally organized non-profit activities of educational, cultural, and developmental value for society, and aimed at a non-academic audience. So, which of the many activities of the conservatory meet social impact criteria? Is it useful to group them into types? To give an answer, this study referred to the categorization by Jun Suzuki in the SIMM research landscape, an analysis of research presented at SIMM events in 2017, 18, and 19, highlighting that social impact has many forms. To categorize the activities promoted by the conservatory over the last 5 years, academic years, the following were considered: A, the type of activity, B, the subject involved, C, the context. As it can be seen, the activities were divided into 11 revisited categories. The profusion and variety of the activity listed should also be related to the scope of the conservatory, an education offering both classical music, early and contemporary, as well as jazz and pop rock, with over 150 professors and 1,000 students a year, of whom 25% are foreign from 50 countries. The research also looked at the annual report of the Conservatory's evaluation unit, and only starting from the 2019 report, a third mission section is present. The study considered 283 third mission public engagement activities. The data show a significant increase in activities over the years, with a decline due to pandemic limitations. The activities for each of the academic years have been classified as shown in the graph. For example, in 2015 to 16, two categories prevailed: social inclusion at 31%, followed by self-development at 28%. 4 categories were absent: empowerment, identity, trust, and violence reduction, and so on for each year considered. These other graphs indicate the number of activities in the subcategories for the academias considered. Overall, graph 8 summarizes the trend of categories. For example, it can be seen that category 1, social inclusion, shows constant values which have grown slightly over the years. Peace and reconciliation shows very low values over the years. Identity has low values and 0 values in 2 years. Violence reduction shows very low values and 0 values in 3 years. Now, graph 9 summarizes the activity of the 5 academic years, such as justice, collaboration, and self-development are equal. The other categories are present from 1% to 5%. Empowerment seem to have had no activity. Just a few considerations on the data analysis. For example, some categories are constant, while others are not. The significance of events does not depend on their quantity. The interruption and modification of musical activities during the pandemic has underlined a certain social fragility, as well as the need to restore the social impact of music activities, along with the possibility of accessing them in the different ways. In our study, another important aspect is the legislative approach. From constitutional dictate, cultural processes are linked to the development and exercise of individual rights and social development. As comments, music, a human tangible creation of interest to everyone, eludes the logic of individual property and should be safeguarded for the benefits of all interested parties, present and future. The legislation on school and higher education reproposes the universal value of music and the arts as tools for individual and social development and enhances social impact expressly or implicitly. The term social impact of music emerges in legislation on the accreditation of a university and higher music education institutes. And this is the legal basis for qualifying music as a public good or part of the commons. The music ecosystem has significantly changed during the pandemic, and with the decline in live music, has seen a considerable increase in music that is listened to. So, is musical participation in a digital form a new challenge for a conservatory? The last chapter is the historical identity. The Conservatory roots lie in the Royal School of Music, commissioned in 1818 by the Duchess Marie-Louise, a boarding school which could be attended free by children from poor families. The training of Arturo Toscanini clearly shows the Royal School of Music's social vocation. He was born into a poor family and was admitted to the Royal School of Music at the age of 9 to study cello and composition. Toscanini was not only a great conductor, he also became an active defender of human rights. He clashed with the fascists and the Nazi dictatorship, using his artistic fame to promote the return of democracy to Italy. Here is an extract of the letter from Albert Einstein to Toscanini in 1936. Claudio Vador, another important conductor who taught at the Conservatory, was Claudio Vador, who promoted the introduction of the Abreu system in Italy. In Parma, he taught chamber music. In years was being renewed, but also of social ferment. To conclude, this study underlines the fact that specialist in music education capable of raising citizenship values. This study reinforces the idea that higher music education also prepares its students to help society advance and to generate far-reaching benefits, improving everyone's quality of life. Thanks for the attention.
Thank you very much, Titiana. It was a nice presentation and thank you for staying so in time. Lovely. I think we move on to the other presentation before we start then our conversation, our discussion. And our second presenter is Lorraine Louberty-Soliman. Lorraine is postdoctoral researcher at the University of Clermont-Auvergne in France. At the Laboratoire Activité, Connaissance, Transmission, Éducation, associated researcher at the University of Toulouse, Jean Jaurès, and member of the collaborative research group MMIS. MMIS stands for Musical Education and Social Integration. Her presentation is entitled The Orchestra Demos Clermont-Ferrand, an interprofessional work. What can we learn from the modalities of coordination between the actors? Lorraine, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Graça. I will share. Okay. So my presentation is based on an ongoing postdoctoral study, as Graça just said, looking at the modalities of interprofessional coordination within Demos Clermont-Ferrand project, starting in October 2019. So Demos is a social music education project emanating from the Cité de la Musique Philharmonie de Paris, created in 2010 in the Île-de-France region, and today spreading to more than 40 territories in France. The Clermont-Ferrand Demos Orchestra started in September 2017 for a duration of 3 years. Each orchestra is composed of 7 groups of about 15 children spread over 7 territories here in Clermont priority districts. These 7 groups meet in workshops twice a week, supervised by an artistic team and a social team. The 7 groups meet in tutti of orchestra 8 times a year. And one of the specificities of the Demos Clermont project is the very large number of actors, especially on the social side. So as one of the specific features of the Clermont project is this wide number of actors, the question of scientific research on professional practices, and more specifically on the modalities of interprofessional coordination, arose. Thus, the ACTE laboratory was chosen by the Clermont-Auvergne metropolis to carry out action research on the working methods of a collective integrating a diversity of actors. So the question thus arose to better understand the diversity of the appropriation of the projects on the territory and the dynamics of asymmetries in order to shed light on, first, the cooperation strategies at work in this situation of intertrade partnership, second, the modalities of collaboration, and third, the adjustments of practices. The survey method is ethnography with 3 target workshop groups within the 7 to better understand the modalities of co-construction of the project based on the actors' actual activity. 3 modes of investigation in particular: observation of the workshops and tuties of orchestra, individual interviews, and times of dialogue and debate with the actors around the observed practices. So this is observation of an intertrade situation. The workshops, the tuties, are as many situations of partnership. And the notion of partnership, says Corinne Merini, marks a relationship of association that organizes common work by putting actors and organizations in interdependence through a reticulation of actions referring to a common problem. So partnership situations are marked by social and knowledge asymmetries. However, in partnership situations, horizontalization of decisions and parity are essential for joint action, says Corinne Merini and Serge Thomaset. This horizontalization of decisions is crossed by a certain number of conflicts, due in particular to the heterogeneity in the conception of the actions to be carried out and the various ways of concretizing them, according to the professional culture of each one. It is the strategies of cooperation as well as the modalities of collaboration in the face of the problems to be overcome. So in other words, the practical adjustments made by the actors and the possible evolution of their vision that this research observes. As action research, our work also tends to contribute to the project by accompanying the actors in the construction of the modalities of cooperation and collaboration. One of the initial motivations expressed for joining demos by musicians is the idea of joining a wider partnership network. So let's take a look at the complexity of this network. Here I have traced the institutional and organizational contours of Demos Clermont as they appeared to me after several months. The work of decoding this complex partnership network was an indispensable first step in the research. It quickly seemed to me indispensable to carry out such a scheme, not only for myself, but also for all the actors. The interviews often revealed a feeling of vagueness at the level of governance and prescriptions. And looking at this scheme, we can understand why. Integrating this gigantic network for musicians is attractive, but also generates many difficulties, not only at the level of governance, but also at the level of intertrade partnership. Here, it is this scheme presents the partnership network at a workshop group level. And all this arose symbolize the exchanges and the dialogue between partners. Of course, we can have design much more arose, but it needed to be readable, sorry. So within the category musicians associated with demos, we obviously find a wide variety of profiles. The 18 musicians involved in Demos Clermont-Ferrand are either musicians employees of the Orchestre National d'Auvergne, either employees of the Regional Conservatory, or independent musicians with different profiles. So very varied profiles, which I was nevertheless able to bring together around several nodal points and also alongside actors from the social field. So here is a diagram representing these 7 identified more or less converging nodal points, and which implicitly or explicitly seem to serve as more or less salient landmarks in the co-construction of the project. Benchmarks that are invested in different ways and translated into a multitude of practices. So here my question was, what does everyone put behind these points? And following this, I was able to carry out a systematic collection of data, which shows the convergences and divergences of practices and conceptions around these 7 points. In parallel to this, 3 important tracks to explore from a cross-business partnership perspective have emerged. Firstly, welcoming the children and setting up the workshop. Secondly, regulating the children's attention. And thirdly, the place of social workers in instrumental learning. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but these 3 dimensions in intertrade work, which were addressed in particular during the collective research session, gave rise to numerous implicit points of view and ways of working that may or may not generate tensions, which it was in any case interesting to bring to light. To conclude temporarily, the flexibility in the demos prescriptions regarding to the modalities of collaboration attached to what is expressed as a blur in the governance, often evoked as a difficult constraint, also has the virtue of opening up other possibilities in terms of partnership. By leaving a lot of space for initiatives, it allows the development of different types of collaboration about which it may be interesting to reflect collectively, with the aim of disseminating them at all levels of the co-construction of the project. But that requires, of course, to bring out the implicit in order to better integrate the point of view of the other in one's own practices. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. You stayed also wonderfully in time and presented quite a complex work. So there is a lot here to discuss and to go about. We move on to our third presentation, who is co-authored by Mia Nakamura. Mia is Associate Professor at the Kyushu University in Japan, and Yukio Sugiyama, who is the Chief of Inclusion and Partnership section at Tokyo Bunka Kaikan. Their presentation is entitled Facilitator Roles and Strategies for Social Inclusion Workshops. And it will be delivered by both authors. So Mia and Yukio, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Mia from Kyushu University, and
this is Yukio from Tokyo Bunka Kaikan.
We are very delighted to be here. Let's begin with our presentation. Okay. Achieving diversity and inclusion in a music workshop is not an easy task. This presentation attempts to articulate the facilitator roles and strategies by looking at the practice of the workshop leader training programs for social inclusion in Tokyo Bunka Kaikan. Running and examining the programs, we have found that there are 2 different types of workshop approaches, and the flexible and creative use of 2 types of approaches could be useful in facilitating workshops for diverse group of participants. We've also discovered that despite the difference in approach, successful workshop leaders have common facilitation practices and strategies.
Tokyo Bunka Kaikan is a prestigious performing arts center in Tokyo. As a public cultural facility, it also offers participatory music workshops such as outreach programs for schools and workshops for disabled people and people with dementia. These workshops are run by workshop leaders who have developed their facilitation skill through Tokyo Bunka Kaikan's training programs. Next slide, please. In 2013, the Tokyo Bunka Kaikan invited members of Casa de Musica from Portugal, and started our own developed educational program while learning from Casa's methodologies. Casa de Musica's workshops are constructed in such a way that it each participant can take on a share of responsibility for activities in the process and are designed to allow the participants to get familiar with the musical rhythms, harmony, forms, and various musical genres in a joyful way. Tokyo Bunkakaikan music workshop leaders first learned the facilitation and leading skills from those Casa de Musica's members and then developed their strategies in their own way. In 2018, we invited a different type of music workshop trainer, Jun Suzuki, a multi-genre keyboard player and composer, has been developing a unique improvisational workshop, Sound Pit, for over 20 years. Suzuki's workshop style is radically different from Casa de Musica's. In his workshop, no one explains what to do to participants. Workshop leaders just spread the musical instruments across the room, and when participants enter, they play the instruments, inviting participants to join them. Often, first-time participants are confused as nothing really happening in the beginning. However, they gradually start joining in and eventually having fun playing together instruments. A group interview with the Tokyo Bunkakaikan workshop leaders revealed the differences between Casa de Musica's and Suzuki's approaches. Most of the music workshops that are delivered, including Casa de Musica's, have a structured program design. For example, there is a clear narrative to follow. There are songs and pieces to play together that are determined in advance, and the workshop leaders are there to facilitate music making for the participants. Therefore, music workshop trainers have to learn how to lead the participants through a process which will enable them to perform music. On the other hand, in Suzuki's workshop leaders only interact with the participants musically. Workshop leader trainees have consequently learned to open their ears carefully, constantly seeking interesting musical fragments to how to develop a unique musical language with participants. Compared to Casa de Musica's approach, Suzuki's method is definitely challenging for young leaders. However, we found both are very useful. For example, when we conduct a workshop with active elders, the structured facilitation approach of Casa de Musica is effective. On contrast, when we go to the nursing home for people with a severe dementia, Suzuki's improvisational approach is more versatile because it does not require any verbal communication.
Training sessions were conducted by Suzuki and Hugh Nankivell of Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, UK in 2019. According to Nankivell, workshop can be broadly divided into the traffic light type. The workshop leaders direct participants on what to do and when, and the roundabout type. The workshop leaders do not give directions. Each participant decides what to do and when, while observing those around them. To follow this classification, workshops with Casa de Musica and Nankivell are the traffic light type, while the Suzuki workshops are the roundabout type. However, closely examining the training programs and the workshops undertaken by Suzuki and Nankivell, we found that there are commonalities in terms of facilitation practices. Number one, workshop leaders carry out in-depth preliminary meetings and preparation and consider risk management. Number two, during the workshop, leaders ensure an environment in which participants can feel safe and express themselves freely and at their own pace by showing respect for the participants and interact with them as equals. And three, workshop leaders attempt to create new expression which builds on the musical expression made by each individual based on improvisational, flexible musical communication. However, the ideal they are striving toward is to embrace each other's diversity within the group rather than assimilation of the individual by the group as a whole. The following strategies are also found in both, although they may appear to be different at the surface level. A, the creation of blank spaces, which allow for participants' voluntary and spontaneous activities. B, the use of the two meanings of play, performing and playing with sound. C, the intention to stimulate a participant interactive and the encouragement of try and error. D, through engagement with each participant, searching for means to allow the participants to join in with every activity in some form. And E, the creation of a unique time and space through music, the intention to inspire participants to feel excited musically. To conclude, through this short presentation, we've shown two distinctive workshop approaches, referring to an example with Casa Musica, Hugh Nankiwill, and Jun Suzuki. One is structured and unified. The other is radically improvisational and individual focused. These approaches may seem conflicting. In reality, both approaches are helpful in facilitating workshops for a diverse group of participants, and the flexible and creative use of the two types of approaches could make a most effective workshop. Furthermore, we've identified 3 facilitator practices and 5 facilitator strategies present in both approaches. Although knowing and doing are not the same, being aware of these practices and strategies can help enable a successful music workshop. Our case studies are not comprehensive, but we hope they can help you deepen your insights into facilitator roles and strategies in social inclusion workshops. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mia and Yukio. That was a nice presentation and one that poses a very significant topic for the success of such workshops. And we will certainly talk about that in the discussion. We move on now to our last presentation. It will be delivered by Thomas Sebastian Köhn, who is a research assistant and lecturer at the Institute of Art, Music and its Mediation at the Leuphana University in Munich. Thomas' presentation is entitled Sampling the Diasporic Other, Jewish German Hip Hop as an Empowering Medium for Negotiating Memories of the Holocaust. Thomas, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Grasa. Screen. So welcome everyone to my presentation. You just mentioned the name of it, so I won't repeat it right here. So since 2014 in Germany, there are some networks around the hip hop artists Salomo, Der Reimteufel, and Zion Ben Israel. Referred to themselves as being Jewish by addressing topics related to Jewish religion in rap music, interviews, music videos, and other media. They combine these negotiations of Jewish religion with different types of memories connected to the Holocaust and with other political topics, resulting in narratives, narratives of collective experiences of trauma. And here I'm going to focus on narratives from an interview and from a talk track. So basically, there are 2 main categories of narratives which are prominent. One is a more victim-centered narrative, representing victims of the Holocaust as being passive. The second type of narratives I will call counter-narrative, which resist or replace the former. While victim narratives are more dominant in the interview and in the autobiography, counter narratives are dominant in the tracks. Now, I would like to focus on the rap artist Ben Salomo, based in Berlin, and give you a few examples of narratives from the interview and the track Identity, where this comes out particularly clear. And I'm going to quote from an interview I conducted in 2019. He says, "I would say that the history of the Jewish people is made up of family and individual histories of suffering, and they collectively share that history in their collective memory. Some were deported to Auschwitz, others to Ravensbrück. These are different components that have a common point. The Holocaust, something that has entered the collective memory of the Jews as a whole." Now, what we can actually see here is that concepts of being Jew, collective understanding, family, and collective memories of the Holocaust seem to be heavily interconnected. However, Salomo understands these narratives as a burden, since through constant repetition, they've become naturalized and rather canonical memory discourses. I'm quoting his interview, the interview again. "I would say that as a Jew, carry this heavy, heavy backpack on shoulders. They carry it because the society around them sees like that." This heavy rucksack functions, of course, as a metaphor, not only for the historical facts connected to the Holocaust, but also for stigmatization of Jewish people by constantly referring to them as victims of the Holocaust. However, if we take a look at the hip-hop track Identität, the role of victims remains completely unsaid, even though partly the same persons do play a role, for example, his grandfather. So I understand the experience of being othered as a passive victim of Holocaust as a driving aspect for resisting or replacing victim narratives by counter-narratives through the medium of hip-hop. Now, three narratives basically play a role here, and they are formed in the lyrics and they are partly supported by the music. One is the unifying narrative, one other is a post-Holocaust narrative, and another one is an empowering narrative. So for now, I would like to give a brief overview of the unifying narrative. And for this, I'm going to play a short example from the track, and underneath it, you can see the lyrics translated into English.
Ben Ariel bedeutet Löwen, Judäa Stockkönig. In meinen Art fließt das Blut von Kämpfern und Kommandeuren. Es überlebte Vertreibung, Pogrome und Hungersnöte. Selbst Auschwitz konnte man nicht töten, aber vielleicht wird.
So the image of ancestral blood is present here, and he styles himself as the king or commander of that which he calls the people. And this people is stylized as heroically surviving the Holocaust. So overcome threats seem to act as the rising moments. Now take a closer look at the music. We see some musical parameters actually supporting counter-narratives. Listening, for example, flow of the rap, tonal variations, as well as playing significant words and phrases on heavy beats, highlight signal words connected to counter-narratives. Also, stops in the musical arrangement support rap phrases, which are of major importance for counter-narratives. And further, some motifs stand out. One of them is played piano and constantly repeated throughout the track. This is basically the second motif displayed here. And it is interesting to see that it shows parallels to different film music, for example. If we compare it to, for example, Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, which is, by the way, the sound to the film The Pianist, we can see a very similar movement, especially long notes of both melodies. However, as Claudia Bulayan states in her research on film, that music, of course, does not sound specifically Jewish in any way, but that conventions from Western art music for musically mediating suffering are at core here. Also, if we take a look at various other films or documentaries, slow piano melodies in minor keys have been played over and over again in similar contexts. So what we can see is that it makes sense for future research to historize the different components, or as John Stratton would call it, the fragments of different counter-narratives. So if I now refer back to the question, what actually motivates musicians participate in social music project, I would say that experiences othering and the stigmatization as passive victims contribute to the desire to form that what I call counter narratives and to replace collective victim narratives by the counter narratives through the medium of hip hop. So thank you very much so far. And I hand over back to you, Grasa.
Thank you, everyone, and many thanks, Thomas, for this very challenging presentation. It is apparently it falls somehow out of the most common presentations in within the SIMM main goals, but indeed it is very significant because it's, from my point of view, it's addressing a complex social way of approaching memories and made it public and go out with that, which is not easy. It's like, you know, treating something which, and especially for the German people, it's a very complex way that you have to live with. We have probably not so much time for discussion so that we can also answer the Q&As, but for a start, I would like first to address all the three first presentations, since they were more or less around a topic which is common. And what I mean with that is that in these three presentations, we see very clearly the urge of institutions and organizations, whether music city halls, orchestras, conservatories, opera houses, to respond to these so-called societal needs and put up programs to get out of their walls and to provide interventions that fall in that category of music, social inclusive projects. And I would like to hear any of you of the first three presentations. Maybe your co-authors would jump in now and try to elaborate a little bit about that. Why is this? And this is, we almost can say worldwide, that this is happening and became a sort of main trend to feel this urge to respond to societal needs to become visible, more visible, especially in the case of conservatories, mainly the most, can we say, maybe the most traditional, with a strong tradition of individual expression, musical expression, ways of perpetuating tradition and some types of music, mainly classical music in that sense. And how is it, how do you see that? Because this is also somehow historical happening now. And who of you would want to jump in the conversation about this? Carlo, maybe?
May I jump in? Hello to everybody. I'm Gilda Ripamonti. I'm from the group of the Titiana Rossi Conservatory Research, and I would like just to start from my point of view, which is a juristic point of view. But for me, it's important to expone it because I think it's it gives a clear message, because in Italy, we debated for many years about the third mission of the university and higher education institution. And at the beginning, the third mission was a part, has been introduced as a third part of the mission of the university, besides didactica and research, no? So teaching and research, and then third mission. But it started as being something which is the openness to the socio-economic context, but that was it. With the transfer of knowledge was a part of the mission, and valorization of research, but that was it. Then this was the definition of third mission at the beginning. Then in 2018, it became something different: public engagement, which is which comes from Europe norms, but it's important to see that the new definition in Italy of public engagement now is the set of non-profit activities organized institutionally by the university or its structures of educational, cultural, and social development value, and aimed at a non-academic audience. So 2 points now. Non-profit activities organized institutionally and dedicated to non-academic audience. These are two normative parts that became very clear, and that has changed now the viewpoint of also person working in university toward the social mission of university. Because before we were in our individual world, no, and at the beginning also the request of public third mission was seen as a communication problem. So we have to make a taxonomy in order to communicate what we do, but it was not clearly related to the social impact, because it was still something that was a way of dissemination of what we were doing. But now telling that it's an institutional mission and it's dedicated to non-academic public changes totally. Yeah. So from the taxonomy of dividing our activities throughout categories that are social impact categories, then we arrive to promote these categories, and at the end to change strategy towards this category. So it's a process, but it's a process that it's going on and is becoming more and more important. This is in general for a university in Italy. Then for conservatories, maybe Titiana wants to say something, I don't know.
Anyone would like to jump in and add little things? Add something, would you like?
Yes, I can continue the discuss opened by Gilda.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wish to discuss on the issue of the institutional engagement in the context of our third mission approach. I think that the institutional engagement in the context of the conservatory, our third mission approach is growing, is improving, and this is for two different reasons. I think that one reason is the awareness that derives from the recent and increasing obligation that institutional activities have to be evaluated also in terms of social impact. This is for university and higher music institution. in Italy. However, there is still not a widespread belief of the need to do so among people, among musicians who teach, and among students who learn, mainly because the daily institutional tasks are always very complex for professors who are committed to many institutional objectives. The first of which is and remains the teaching instrument or vocals. Our research tried to put the public engagement activity into a thematic classification, but other questions are open. For example, are social music activities of public engagement oriented to genuine social needs? Is the impact on society clearly identified? Is there a clear relationship between the various institutional tasks, for example, with research? Is there an urgent need to reevaluate them? I think that the second reason can be found in the awareness of the musicians themselves in affirming the value of music, of their art and their life work, and in becoming active in social music projects, especially at a time like this. The pandemic has made us more fragile and more aware of the need to share making music together for others, to respond to concrete social needs in all-inclusive way, to give young people solid competencies to take part in jobs that are useful to society and its sustainable development. Our work has shown that the pandemic has also had a serious impact of the aspect of the social and cultural life, and
Titiana, can we just shorten it a bit so that we can go to other themes?
Yes, yes, to conclude with regard to our session on research on what motivates musicians to become active in social music project, I think the principal aspect when someone starts this kind of research is to identify the critical points in context and to try to look at them in an original way. And the critical thing that Graca and Luca spoke about during the last podcast, I think we must contemplate music as a good property of everyone, a common right that has the power to improve society. And
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Titiana, for your elaboration. I would jump now to Thomas. So since I wouldn't say he stands out of this nice bouquet, but he really stands out. And so I would like, maybe Thomas, would you elaborate a little bit on how you consider that this motivation for resisting or replacing victim narratives by counter narratives, how can this become, from your point of view, how can this become an empowering narrative? How do you bridge this? How do you think it may be bridged?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So now I would say that this, well, in my research, this empowering narrative basically is one narrative among many different. However, different things going on, I would say that you can sort of like interpret them quite differently. So for example, different lines, for example, can be interpreted as empowering narratives. For example, also empowering narratives do play a certain role, for example, in workshops they're doing with public schools and also in books they're writing. And different social media channels there, right? So there are always this sort of like empowering narrative, which are a little bit of omnipresent over different kind of themes, if you want it like that. So how this actually looks like is, for example, when they are wrapping things like people can plant trees on scorched earth, like pioneers, there is something new. And then they are sort of like actively addressing the listeners, for example, by asking them, what's the question is hidden behind your name? So I see that this sort of like empowering narrative is something is directly addressing listeners while at the same time focusing on marginalized histories.
Oh, yeah.
So sort of like need of elaborating on the own history, but without marginalizing the own people, if you want to use that word, in this victim kind of way, but more show that there are also stories behind those histories. And by sort of like his, this more heroic way of writing history, if you want it like that, becomes this sort of like demarginalization, if you want it like that, yeah.
Thank you. This is indeed a very complex thing, and I would like to see a line of research in this area of complicated memories in SIMM, and maybe we can later speak about that. How can SIMM so be a roof also for this type of research? I have a question maybe to Lorraine, which should be, your presentation was really indeed complex, and I just will pick up on your conclusion when you speak about inter-trade collaboration and partnership, and given all the participants in the process, what are you thinking of when you speak about the need to bring out the implicit in order to better integrate the point of view of the other in one's own practices? It seems to me this is a crucial point for the success of your project.
Yeah, thank you, Graça, for your very interesting question. Of course, it was too short to go deeper, but I will try to answer now. So, of course, you understood within such a complex partnership network, which brings together so many actors, interprofessional tensions, and also within the same profession. Here, among musicians in particular, you had strong tensions, sometimes implicit, sometimes explicit. It's inevitable, of course. It's by no means a specificity of demos, of course. But here, it is a very wide variety of professional cultures which are put in partnership, involving moreover a great variety of institutional operators, as you say. And in addition, on a national scale. So it's very, very ambitious. And the level of complexity in the interactions is very high because it is based on a very large number of explicit and implicit asymmetries. So in most situations encountered, the partner actors are confronted with numerous ways of seeing the situation, of responding to it, without necessarily being aware of them, or at least not of the totality of these visions and ways of doing things and so on. So in practice, in real time, the dialogue between all these actors cannot necessarily take place. And therefore the situations and their various interpretations remain mostly unexplained, mostly blurred sometimes. And in the eyes of some or others, it can remain very much confused. Yeah. Which often generates tensions. One example, within the artistic and social teams, one of these tension. Among the tracks to explore from a cross-business partnership perspective, if you remember on slide 10, you had this point welcoming the children and setting up the workshop, for instance. And I could easily notice at least two ways of envisaging this moment on the social and on the artistic team side. First way, a gradual startup where the adults let the children settle into the session, make a transition within the day behind them, with the day behind them, get back in touch with a friend, etc. And second option, a quicker start, where the adults explicitly invite the children to start in a more or less firm way, or by explicit gestures, etc. So two main ways, of course, a multiplicity of other ways. These different ways of thinking and about getting to work are experienced by all. And sometimes this can generate implicit or explicit tensions or annoyances for some who do not proceed in the same way. And I think bringing out and discussing these two practices, for example, that this is what we tried to do during the action research, and inviting all the actors to meet and dialogue, debate about real practices. And this can help to break down certain misunderstanding experienced in real time. So my conclusion, if we can say like that, it may be necessary to envisage more space for interprofessional exchange or dialogue, exchange and debates associating all the actors concerned, professionals in the field and hierarchical superiors at the highest level. This is what we try to do around real work situations, in order to not to go well, to discuss ancient topics or previous positions, and to allow a dialogue with that is perhaps less tense on previous positions. And this is on a smaller scale. This is what we try to do, like I said, within the action research in demos. And this is, well, in small, yeah.
Thank you, thank you. We could stay here. I would love to stay here. There are so many questions, really. I would not like to end before I make a comment. Maybe it's a mixture of a comment and a question to Mia and Yukio, because I thought that their sort of dichotomic way of putting on one side the so-called traffic light, the workshop leader that directs more or less and says what's going to happen, and on the other side the roundabout strategy, which is more let it grow from the public before you tell them what to do. I must say I have here a little conflict of interests, because I have worked a lot with Casa de Música and I have participated in the workshops. And what I think, don't you think that it is more a kind, not that Casa de Música always does traffic light, because it doesn't. It does also roundabout. And I have, for instance, participated in a recreation of the Rite of Spring from Stravinsky, and everything came from the people involved. They constructed, coming from their songs, from their memories, from those folk songs, which is what is about the Rite of Spring, and coming from that, and it was all built. And I thought it was very interesting when you said at the beginning they felt nothing was happening, and they felt kind of frustrated because they didn't see what is going to be this. It takes time. So would you say that it's a clear cut like that? On the one side, you have the Suzuki approach. On the other side, you have the Casa de Música. I am skeptical about your so clear cut distinction. What do you have to say about that?
Okay, I thought you were saying that. So I'm answering first, then ask Yukio to answer. But because the short of time, I couldn't explain very precisely. But actually, roundabout type and traffic type is a kind of ideological prototype. And I would say most workshops are between those two. So there are gradation.
Yeah.
So although I said Casa de Música's workshop is traffic light, I don't think everything is traffic light. But there are elements of roundabout type too. However, when we talk about the workshop training, definitely the trainers are different type. I mean, they taught differently. I mean, Casada Musical type to lead and improvising many things. But on the other hand, Suzuki's approach is very different. Then trainees had a very hard time to adjust the Suzuki's approach, but eventually they learn both approaches, and perhaps they could combine these two in their workshop. So I didn't mean that Casada Musica is only traffic type. I understand, I knew they have both elements.
Yeah.
Yukio, do you want to say something?
Yes, I I completely understand it. Sorry?
We have to finish, so very short. Sorry.
Yes. No, it's okay. I want to add quickly that it's just a differentiation of how we paraphrase the workshop in a very short time. I understand the Casa Musica's approaches, or any creative workshop needs improvisational part, or any the workshop leaders or musician has to facilitate the participants' creativity, and they have to build up the ideas based on that. But the uniqueness about Suzuki's workshop is they don't have any structures or even in a theme. So if you'd like to find out more, I'm going to put the link in the chat, so please read it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you so much. This is so much to talk about, and it was really fascinating to be with you all, and thank you very much. I think we have to hand over it now to Lucas for at least one or two Q&A.
Yes, but Grasa, I want you to stay with me. I will propose the questions if you can continue to chair the discussion. To start with a question of Alva Kenny, which was already discussed with, it's a question to Lorraine, but I think I can put the question to you anyway, because her question is, can you speak about the possible competing expectations of these partners involved in the project of Demos? This, Lorraine, you already discussed, and you gave some examples, but Alva's question is how this affected the partnership. Maybe you can go a bit deeper into this. Mm-hmm. How the possibly competing expectations affected the partnership within the project.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes. In fact, this is affecting the project in a certain way. As far as I could see during the research, is, for instance, on the nodal point. Artistic rendering. You see, on this specific point, within the artistic team, within the musicians in particular, you have a lot of tensions, but not necessarily explicit tensions, but a lot of tensions. Some of them, they see the artistic rendering as the main objective of the project, and in that sense, they really expressed during the interviews the fact that they lack time to work deeply with every child. The instrument, you understand what I mean, to have more time to practice. This is in order to have the best results as possible for the concert. And for maybe, I don't know, let's say 50% of the other musicians, Demos offers a wonderful platform to experience many experiences surrounding musical practice, not only learning how to practice your instrument, but also learning how to dance and to connect dancing with music, learning to go to the theater in the center of the city, etc. Many other things surrounding surrounding the music in demos that are considered very important for a large part of the musicians, but that are considered as how to say that, perte de temps, lack of time for other musicians. And you see, only this very single example shows that these tensions, this kind of tensions generate conflicts that are, I don't know if I answer correctly, but
we will be able to find out much more about demos because the symposium is organized in Paris by Demos and the Philharmonie Paris to begin the first days of November. So we will have opportunities to find out more about the program. I have, Grasa, I have a question from Georgia Nicolaou. Question to Mia and Yukio. The question is, do the participants also contribute in the designing of the activities? And if so, does this contribute to the building of resilience or empowerment? Quite a question. Difficult to answer in a shortly, I guess.
So, Mrs. shall I answer this?
Sure.
So Yukio or Mia?
I will do that. So hi.
For you.
So now I'm going to answer this. For the workshop at the moment, unfortunately, we don't involve the participants to designing process yet. But it is our wish that one day, someday, we can make or design the workshop with the participants, particularly people with a dementia, or maybe people with disabilities, or maybe people with a specific social background, because it is very important when we try to approach the social problems or social norms. So we'd like to do it, but at the moment we don't. But I am sure the contribution from the participants can definitely building the resilience, and also it becomes empowerment. And as I put on our link in the chat a few minutes ago, the improvisational workshop can also enrich self-resilience and self-respect. So it may be very powerful for arts institutions to use the arts and the creativities or corporations, how the artwork are made is very powerful tools to support the people at any background. Thank you.
May I add something? Although Yukiko said they didn't incorporate participants' ideas for the workshop design, if you think it's just a part, if you say to think of the workshop design before workshop, they don't do that. But if you think, if you say a workshop design in terms of just the part of workshop, then it is happening. Like Hugh Nankiville today is here too. His workshop, the part of the workshop is kind of designed by the participants. Not the entire workshop, but the part of the workshop is designed by participants, because he asks the idea from the participants, then he adapts this idea to develop his workshop. So that is happening in some way, I think.
Yes, that's true. Thank you.
Thank you. We only have a few minutes left, so I'll propose one more question. It's from Imogen Flower. She's asking the following question. Well, European classical music seems to be central to the public engagement and educational program presented by Titiana and Lorraine. Is there any worry that assumptions about the universal good of access to this particular canon of music might actually perpetuate some social inequalities? So who would like to answer this?
may I suggest that Thomas jump in this answer?
Me too, me too.
Okay, but let him, he had less floor than you.
Thank you, Gesa. Yeah, I would say this is a pretty interesting question. Well, I would say that, of course, there is actually the possibility of classical music to sort of like construct these dichotomy between marginalized people and maybe Western academia or something like that. Or also maybe global dichotomy between the West and the rest, sort of like, right? On the other hand, I have witnessed some things like that marginalized groups sometimes. I mean, I can only refer this to Jewish people I've been doing research on, right? I've witnessed this, that some groups tend to use some classical elements in their music in order to be able to communicate with the, for example, more academic sort of audience. So I have the opinion that they use this to to open up the field, not only for people listening to hip hop, for example, but also to open up the whole thing to sort of like deconstruct this dichotomic relation. And another thing is that I would say that part of classical music isn't really that big, at least if I'm sort of like looking at hip hop, for instance, in Germany. Of course, I've been talking about specifically classical theme that I mentioned, but on the other hand, also other very many other elements from different kinds of music. For example, Ashkenazi music plays a role in these hip hop groups as well. And I would even say that those play a bigger role. So my intention is, or my sort of feeling is that it's more about giving space to many different sort of cultural aspects, also on a musical layer, you know. So yeah.
Thank you, Grasa. Thank you, everybody. Before closing this session, we can now first listen and see a short 3-minute video of music proposed by the project The Caravan. It's a fine example of social and community music project in the city of Antwerp in Belgium. Luc Ness, I hope he's around with us. Luc Ness, can you tell us what we will be seeing?
Yes, of course. Hello, everybody. I'm Luc Ness from Antwerp. I'm leading the organization Madame Fortuna. We are doing participate artistic work here on the field of theater, but also music. So we have a big project in Belgium, but also on an international level with Barcelona and also Skopje, Macedonia. And it's an international intercultural project with extra attention for Gitanos, for the Roma. And it started 8 years ago because a Roma man asked to work together. So it was a question. No, or maybe you don't know, but the Roma community is a very hermetic community. They live with 12 million people in Europe. So, but they are hermetic, but on the other hand, they have a lot of artistic qualities, especially in the field of music. So we started an intercultural project with them. The first years, we start from their traditions, but now we are more making new compositions with them. So it's really a nice project, and you will see a small video when it started in 2014. So I hope you will enjoy it.
Thank you, Madame Fortuna, the Caravan, Luc Ness. It's great that you succeeded to propose us this little wonderful film with fine music, and so good to end this session in the position. Thanks a lot. Thank you also, Grasa Mota, Mia Nakamura, Yukio Sugiyama, Thomas Köhn, Titiana Rossi, Carlo Lopresti, Lucia, I hope my pronunciation is good, Lucia Brigenti, Gilda Ripamonti, Lorraine Roberti, and Luc Ness again for your precious contributions today. So next week, Tuesday, 2nd of March, I will myself chair the first of two sessions on research on the practice and research on music in social and community projects in the Global South. It will be organized again in the afternoon, our afternoon, Belgian afternoon, starting at 4 p.m. Central European time. If you listen to our SIMM podcast, you can later this week find a new podcast introducing these sessions. After more symposium sessions planned, find all the details on the websites of SIMM. And I hope you're with us again these coming weeks. Bye-bye.